Final Reward by Terry Pratchett. Dogger answered the door when he was still in his dressing gown. Something unbelievable was on the doorstep. There's a simple explanation, thought Dogger. I've gone mad. This seemed a satisfactory enough rationalization at 7 o'clock in the morning. He shut the door again and shuffled down the passage, while outside the kitchen window the Northern line rattled with carriages full of people who weren't mad, despite appearances. There is a blissful period which the Yen Buddhists, like Zen Buddhists, only bigger begging bowls, call plinky. It is defined quite precisely at that interval between waking up and being hit on the back of the head by all the problems that kept you awake the night before. It ends when you realize that this was the morning everything was going to look better in, and it doesn't. He remembered that row with Nicky. Well, not exactly row, more a kind of angry silence on her part, and an increasingly exasperated burbling on his. He wasn't quite sure how it started anyway. He recalled saying something about some of her friends looking as though they wore their own bread and baked their own goats. And then it escalated to the level where he'd probably said things like, "Since you ask, I do think 2CVs have the anti-nuclear sticker laminated into their rear window before they leave the factory." If he had been on the usual form he achieved after a pint of white wine, he probably passed a remark about dungarees on women too. It had been one of those rows where every jocular attempt to extract himself had opened another chasm under his feet. And then she'd shattered the silence with all those comments about Erdan, macho wish fulfillment for adolescence, and then there'd been comments about Rambo, and then he'd found himself arguing the case for people in cold sobriety he detested as much as he did. And then he'd come home and written the last chapter of Erdan and the Serpent of the Rim, and out of pique, alcohol, and rebellion he'd killed off his hero on the last page. Crushed under an avalanche, the fans were going to hate him. But he'd felt better afterwards, freed of something that had held him back all these years, and had made him quite rich, incidentally. That was because of computers, because half the fans he met now worked in computers. And of course in computers they give you a wheelbarrow to take your wages home. Science fiction fans might break out in pointy ears from time to time, but they bought books by the shovelful and read them round the clock. Now he'd have to think of something else for them, write proper science fiction, learn about black holes and quantums. There was another point nagging his mind as he yawned his way back to the kitchen. Oh yes, Erdan the Barbarian had been standing on his doorstep. Funny that. This time the hammering made small bits of plaster detach themselves from the wall around the door, which was an unusual special effect in an hallucination. Dogger opened the door again. Erdan was standing patiently next to his milk. The milk was white and in bottles. Erdan was 7 feet tall and in a tiny chainmail loincloth. His torso looked like a sack full of footballs. In one hand he held what Dogger knew for certainty was Skung, the sword of the ice gods. Dogger was certain about this because he had described it thousands of times, but he wasn't going to describe it again. Erdan broke the silence. "I have come," he said, "to meet my maker." "Pardon?" "I have come," said the barbarian hero, "to receive my final reward." He peered down Dogger's haw expectantly and rippled his torso. "You're a fan, right?" said Dogger. "Pretty good costume." "What," said Erdan, "is fan?" "I want to drink your blood," said Skung conversationally. Over the giant's shoulder, metaphorically speaking, although under his massive armpit in real life, Dogger saw the postman coming up the path. The man walked round Erdan, humming, pushed a couple of bills into Dogger's unresisting hand, opined against all the evidence that it looked like it being a nice day, and strolled back down the path. "I want to drink his blood too," said Skung. Erdan stood impassively, making it quite clear that he was going to stay there until the snow mammoths of Hikuli came home. History records a great many foolish comments, such as, "It looks perfectly safe," or "Indians? What Indians?" And Dogger added to the list with an old favourite which has caused more encyclopedias and life insurance policies to be sold than you would have thought possible. "I suppose," he said, "that you'd better come in." No one could look that much like Erdan. His leather jerkin looked as though it had been stored in a compost heap. His fingernails were purple, his hands calloused, his chest a trestle-work of scars. Something with a mouth the size of an armchair appeared to have a grip on his arm at some time, but it couldn't have liked the taste. What it is, Dogger thought, is I'm externalizing my fantasies, or I'm probably still asleep. The important thing is to act natural. Well, well, he said. Erdan ducked into what Dogger would have liked to have called his study, which was just like any other living room but had his word processor on the table, and sat down in the armchair. The springs gave a threatening creak. Then he gave Dogger an expectant look. Of course, Dogger told himself, he could just be your everyday homicidal maniac. Your final reward, he said weakly. Erdan nodded. What form does this take exactly? Erdan shrugged. Several muscles had to move out of the way to allow the huge shoulders to rise and fall. It is said, said he, that those who die in combat will feast and carouse in your hall forever. Oh, Dogger said uncertainly at the doorway. My hall. Erdan nodded again. Dogger looked around him. What with the telephone and the coat rack, it was already pretty crowded. Opportunities for carouse looked limited. And, how long is forever exactly? Until the stars die and the great ice covers the world, said Erdan. Ah, I thought it might be something like that. Cobbin's voice crackled in the earpiece. Your what? It said. I said I've given him a lager and a chicken leg and put him in front of the television, said Dogger. You know what? It was the fridge that really impressed him. He thinks I've got the next ice age shut in a prison. What do you think of that? And the TV is how I spy on the world, he says. He's watching Neighbours and he's laughing. Well, what do you expect me to do about it? Look, no one could act that much like Erdan. It'd take weeks just to get the stink right. I mean, it's him. Really him. Just as I always imagined him. And he's sitting in my study watching soaps. You're my agent. What do I do next? Just calm down. Cobbin's voice sounded soothing. Erdan is your creation. You've lived with him for years. Years is okay. Years was in my head. It's right now, in my house, that's on my mind. And he's very popular, and it's only to be expected that when you take a big step like killing him off— You know I had to do it! I mean 26 books! The sound of Erdan's laughter boomed through the hall. Okay, so it preyed on your mind, I can tell. He's not really there. You said the milkman couldn't see him. The postman. Yes, but he walked around him. Ron, I created him. He thinks I'm God, and now I've killed him off, he's come to meet me. Kevin? Yes, what? Take a few tablets or something. He's bound to go away. These things do. Dogger put the phone down carefully. Thanks a lot, he said bitterly. In fact, he gave it a try. He went down to the hypermarket and pretended that the hulking figure that followed him wasn't really there. It wasn't that Erdan was invisible to other people. Their eyes saw him all right, but somehow their brains seemed to edit him out before he impinged on their higher centers. That is, they could walk around him and even apologized automatically if they bumped into him, but afterwards they would be at a loss to explain what they had walked around and who they had apologized to. Dogger left him behind in the maze of shelves, working on a desperate theory that if Erdan was out of his sight for a while he might evaporate like smoke. He grabbed a few items, scurried through the blessedly clear checkout, and was back on the pavement before a cheerful shout made him stiffen and turn around slowly as though on casters. Erdan had mastered shopping trolleys. Of course, he was really quite bright. He'd worked out the maze of the mad god in a matter of hours after all, so a wire box on wheels was a doddle. He'd even come to terms with the freezer cabinets. Of course, Dogger thought, Erdan and the Top of the World, Chapter 4, he'd survived on a 10,000-year-old woolly mammoth, fortuitously discovered in the frozen tundra. Dogger had actually done some research about that. It had told him that it wasn't in fact possible, but what the hell? As far as Erdan was concerned, the wizard Tesco had simply prepared these mammoths in handy portion packs. I watch everyone, he said proudly. I like being dead. Dogger crept up to the trolley. But it's not yours. Erdan looked puzzled. It is now, he said. I took it. Much easy. No fighting. I have drink. I have meat. I have "My name is Tracy, how may I help you?" I have "Nuts in a bag." Dogger pulled aside most of a cow in small polystyrene boxes, and Tracy's mad, terrified eyes looked up at him from the depths of the trolley. She extended a sticker gun in both hands, like Dirty Harry about to have his day made, and priced his nose at 98p a pound. "Soap," said Dogger. "It's called soap. Not like neighbours. This one is useful. You wash with it." He sighed. "Vigorous movements of the wet flannel over parts of your body," he went on. "It's a novel idea, I know. And this is a bath," he added, "and this is the sink, and this is called a lavatory. I've explained about it before." "It is smaller than the bath," Erdan complained mildly. "Yes, nevertheless, and these are towels to dry you, and this is a toothbrush, and this is a razor." He hesitated. "You remember," he said, "when I put you in the Serglio of the Emir of the White Mountain? I'm pretty certain you had a wash and shave then. This is just like that." "Where are the Houri?" "There are no Houri. You have to do it yourself." A train screamed past, rattling the scrubbing brush of the wash basin. Erdan growled. "It's just a train," said Dogger. "A box to travel in. It won't kill you. It won't hurt you. Just don't try to kill one."